Thanks to everybody for joining our session today, Understanding APIs, where we'll talk about all things APIs. What are they? Where is the technology now and where is it going? Really the practical applications for a lot of the finance and Treasury professionals on the phone today. And before we jump into the subject matter here, just a quick introduction of the speakers themselves. Myself, I'm John Paquette. I lead the customer success function for TIS's US market. I joined TIS back in 2019, and prior to that, I really have a Treasury practitioner background. So my entire career was as a Treasury practitioner directly. So from that standpoint, this API topic is one that's very interesting to me. It solves a lot of the historical challenges that I know that I saw as a treasurer myself with things like receiving bank data and system integrations and things like that. So I am very excited to jump into the content here today. Co-speaking with me today, and I'm very excited to have him here, is Stephen Batiste, who is our Chief Technology Officer for TIS, and I'll let him introduce himself a bit as well.
So I'm the CTO of TIS. I've been at TIS since May last year, so I've been here since Corona started and still going on. So everything's been remote mostly. My background isn't actually Treasury, it's more technology, but I actually started in video games when I was 8 years old, making my first professional game when I was 11. Moved to California where I spent most of my life from England. And in California, actually started a few companies in 2011 around machine learning, big data. APIs were a big influence on those companies. And then moved to Berlin, where I'm working at TIS now.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'd say we're well covered from a subject matter expertise here on what is a very heavy technical topic and one that I know is very interesting to the community. So I'm excited to jump into the conversation today. Maybe we could start with just a brief explanation of what are APIs, that the high level, not super deep technical explanation of what they are, and maybe also just some areas where they're being used today to frame up the conversation a bit.
Oh yes, so sure. API actually stands for Application Programming Interface. And there's many different types of APIs. In financial APIs, it's usually a means to be able to retrieve information exactly when a user wants to, or a system or a process wants to. Examples of data from the information access are transactions, payments, balances, usual kind of data that treasurers float around. Now, to kind of qualify for inclusion as a financial data API, a product must have access to the financial data, connect to multiple financial applications, be able to sync data across multiple applications, and then also be designed specifically for the use in the financial sector. So, and that's mostly what we'll be talking about today when it comes to APIs, is the financial side of APIs.
Great. So yeah, so they're essentially sophisticated little applications that are used for moving data around, right, at a very precise level, I guess is a good way to describe them from a practical standpoint. So, and like you mentioned today, we're going to talk about APIs being used for bank transaction data, bank balances. They can also be used for things like master data, for example, bank account management data, to synchronize that holistically across an organization, or for synchronizing information that's relevant for cash flow forecasting, payables and receivables data, right, from ERPs or for FP&A based type softwares and things like that. So they have a lot of use cases today in Treasury, and I think they're really exciting, really bringing a lot of value to the market. I guess just out of curiosity, Treasury organizations and finance professionals are really familiar with quite a few different ways to move data around. Historically, things like SFTP, for example, is one that I think most organizations are familiar with. So why are APIs any different than these kind of historical, ways of moving information around?
So we go back further than SFTP, like we've all probably experienced sending spreadsheets around via email or even paper by regular mail. SFTP is a step above this, but it's still not, you're still physically sending a file that you prepared. Now, when you link via an API, two or more systems can send data directly to and from each other. So there's no need for a file to be imported or exported. And it's also a two-way connection, so the same information can be made available to both systems, which brings in the real-time component.
Interesting, yeah. So you get away from this file-based form of communication between systems, and you get to a very finite data level instead with APIs, which is really interesting, I think. And just in general, I hear about all different types of APIs in general. There are, people talk about open banking APIs. They talk about REST APIs, and I'm just kind of curious, what's the difference? Or, I guess is there kind of one type of API that's being universally used these days more so?
This is a complex question, but I'll try to summarize it simply. So there's 3 different main API types. We have REST, which stands for Representational State Transfer, which is the main one that you just mentioned. We have RPC, which is Request Response Protocol. And then we also have SOAP, which is Simple Object Access Protocol. Now, each one offers different skills and technologies and abilities. So if we look at, say, SOAP, it's based on XML and it's very strict. And if we look at REST, it's less strict, it's more flexible. You can send text, you can send JSON format, you can send XML. So most people these days are going towards the REST way of doing things. But not all services are actually APIs. There's different types of APIs as well. So we have public APIs, partner APIs, internal APIs, composite APIs. And as the name says, public means it's available for everyone as an API. A partner API is specifically selected so only authorized people outside of consumers can do this. And then internal APIs are for internal use only. There's no outside access. It's just internally used only. Now with composite APIs, it's just a mix of these. And that's pretty much where it all is. Like most people using REST, as I said, there's still SOAP out there, there's still RPC out there. It just depends on which stage of the company the API was made. And most people are now transitioning into the REST.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain a pretty complex topic there. And it does seem like REST APIs are winning out. Those are the ones that I hear more and more these days that organizations are using for API-based integration. So, and just one more question to frame up this conversation is, why is now all of a sudden the right time for APIs? What sparked all the interest in them? It seems like a lot of it is market driven, particularly on the banking side. A lot of Treasury practitioners, finance professionals are pushing this, particularly in the US with their banking partners. They want real time. But even more from like a technology standpoint, did something change more so fundamentally that just all of a sudden enabled all this API-based connectivity within applications?
Well, APIs have actually been around since the 1960s, so it's not a new technology. I think what did enable APIs was the internet and the use cases of the internet and slowly transitioning into the cloud. Excuse me. Now, there's a lot of marketing brought from the fintechs as well. We hear terms like data is the new gold, it increases productivity, it saves costs, improves connectivity and collaboration, encourages innovation, enhances customer experience, improves marketing, collects data from intelligence analytics, and also creates new revenue opportunities. Now, it all sounds kind of buzzwordy or slogan-y, but it's actually all pretty true. APIs do enable this.
Yep. That's interesting, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of practical applications, obviously, that are coming about now for Treasury and finance professionals. One is the so-called, you hear a lot about these days, the best of breed solutions, right? That being able to basically integrate an endless string of applications through API, allow those applications to share data in a really frictionless way to support a lot of different processes at a very precise level. And if you think about historically the early days of TMSs, or when I first started, they were called Treasury workstations even. If you had mentioned to Treasury practitioners that they had to manage multiple systems instead of one, they'd look at you like you were crazy, right? And so I guess what has really changed to allow this to be so much easier to accomplish these days than it used to? I think you answered this in a good way. It's that these aren't being done through, historical clunky file-based integrations anymore. But is there more to it than that that's really facilitating this kind of best of breed model?
Well, yeah, like when we look at the API integrations, it definitely allows different products from different vendors to be all connected into your own custom ecosystem. So you're no longer reliant on these TMSs or workstations or whatever the name was for it before. Now you can kind of choose the products that are best for you as a company, connect them all together with APIs, and then get just a tool that's custom made for you using the, as they say, best in class or best in breed products.
Great. And do these applications themselves need to be built, I guess, in a certain way to be able to take advantage of these really specific API calls, right? I guess, I hear a lot about, and we don't have to get into the technical weeds necessarily about it, but, monolith versus microservice for application architecture, or even, the shift from on-premise to cloud, has probably been huge in facilitating a lot of, the ability to use APIs for best of breed solutions, right? Would you say that's accurate?
So I would say yes and no. So APIs do allow this. You don't need to worry about whether it's cloud, whether it's physical, whether it's microservice or monolithic. APIs kind of abstract all that away. But no two APIs are the same. So connecting, you can't just say, I've got one API, let me connect it with my API. It's not going to work. You have to custom code in order to do so. When you have multiple products, you really need to make sure that those products' APIs are designed to be connected to what you're trying to connect them to. If not, you have to have something that will do that for you, or build something.
Makes sense. Yeah. So it's not as easy as just hooking in any two applications together and just calling that best of breed, right? There's a lot more to it than just that. And hopefully the architectures themselves are making that at least easier for organizations to accomplish through APIs as well. Because certainly there are a lot of practical examples that have come to the market now in terms of best of breed type solutions, right? So you could theoretically do things like use a Treasury aggregator, a hub of your banking information to, synchronize your banking information with your banking partners real time through API, and then subsequently synchronize that information with a cash applications tool through API for real time cash applications and reconciliation. Synchronize it also with a cash flow forecasting tool to be proactively updating your cash position and your forecast based on real time data. That cash flow forecasting tool can be looking to a source of market rate information to be constantly translating your foreign currency positions to a corporate currency, for example. And you can manage all the user management around this through an API to your identity management system, right? So that you're proactively, deactivating user access to these systems as organizations leave the organization. So it's like this endless string of communication really shifting around in this web here. And I think that there's obviously just a whole ton of benefit and just, endless use cases for this as APIs start to get more mature and easier to access for a lot of these organizations. So
exactly, it's almost kind of like Lego building, where you have all these building blocks of different products that you can connect together in different ways that makes sense for you as a company. So you can do the Forex the way you want to do it, and you can just layer it as well. So it's not just one-to-one connections, you can have many-to-one or a chain of APIs.
Right. That's exciting stuff. And I mean, yeah, so that's on the application side. We haven't even touched upon the bank API side yet, which is, the area that a lot of organizations are even most interested in. And particularly, you hear a ton these days from treasurers around real-time cash visibility. I want real-time cash visibility and the promises that APIs have to really deliver this for corporates. But, it's almost like real-time cash management because you have both the visibility side of it, and APIs are allowing for the use of instant payment methods as well, right? That settle instantly as well. So huge advantages for organizations in that respect. And I guess, how are banks moving towards this, or how are banks really achieving this? I know in Europe there's PSD2, which is an actual mandate for banks to start to open up more to the fintech providers. Like I mentioned before, in the US, we don't have the same kind of mandates. It's more organic. It's actually driven by market demand, but to use these real-time cash management type structures. But just curious, how are the banks able to facilitate this these days?
Yes, so different banks offer different ways of doing it depending on the country. Like Europe does have open banking, which makes it some kind of standardization. But like if you look at open banking, for instance, there's no real standards for what, there's a minimum you can deliver, whether it's generic kind of data, but every bank's going to want to add that extra function. Whether it's a neobank, they're going to add extra functionality to that API. Then you have to manage all these APIs. Now, what the big banks are doing is like virtual accounts for treasurers, so you can do real-time cash and liquidity management. They're building banking platforms so that you can actually have more products within the banking platforms themselves. And we're just seeing kind of a lot more innovation, but really an API is still abstracting a bank's back-end systems. So even though the API is real time, who knows whether the back-end is actually going to be able to deliver real time, because it may be calling layers of like technology from going back to the 1950s or 60s. It could even be like an old IBM mainframe under there, for all we know. So it's really still a minefield of different banks doing different things, but it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good point about the bank's architecture. It seems like we talk to a lot of banks who have grown through acquisition over the years and have multiple different platforms they're trying to mesh together to appear as one holistic, bank service. But really the way APIs access those has to be pretty complex as well, I would think, right? So, and that's a good point, on the corporate side more so, you have to do something to be able to access all these different APIs, to be able to navigate all these different API protocols, right? So it's either you have a software that's able to implement each bank specific API, depending on their capabilities, or you're utilizing, something that sits in the middle of it and kind of does all that for you, right? Something that accesses the banks and is able to implement each one of those API calls specifically to those potential banking partners. And then from a corporate perspective, the systems just hook into that one hub of communication, like a Treasury aggregator, for example, could be one strategy, right? So.
Exactly, yeah, but you can end up pretty quickly if you have a lot of connectivity because you have a complex treasury system with just spaghetti APIs, just like a collection of APIs all over the place. But there are solutions for this, though, so that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a good segue into, a question I get all the time, the separating fact from fiction, what is actually achievable with APIs with the banks? And I think, the answer to that question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it depends on the capabilities of the bank's API, right? So for some banks, they're offering APIs for reporting. That's probably the most common one that we see to be able to pull your prior day, current day balances and transactions. Some offer APIs for payments. Some aren't able to accept, very large AP batch files through API, for example, we've seen historically, right? Because these are just massive, amounts of data that really are better suited for those historical file-based movements that we mentioned before, right? Just because of the amount of data that you're moving through and the maturity of the API. And for that reason, it's probably a question of, do you want to use APIs from both an efficiency standpoint and a standardization standpoint? Because you can get the efficiencies, but most organizations also want to do things in a standardized way, not a bank by bank way across the organization. So maybe something to keep in mind there, I would think, right? So
yeah, definitely. Like there is basic standardization for the open banking. So in Europe, if all your treasury is in Europe for banks, it's pretty simple, but you're not going to get much information. You're just going to get generic balance statements, like you said.
Yep.
If you want to do more, then you have to write custom code to actually talk to these different APIs. You also need to manage all the access keys for these APIs, which is a big task. Then most people are going to have banks in the US as well, banks in Asia. That adds complexity because there's no standards there that match the European standards. So it is really, really complex. And it sounds like it's supposed to solve all the problems of connectivity, but really it's just kind of pushing us in the right direction, but not actually solving the problem yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from that standpoint, a lot of treasurers then question, it seems like there's two camps of people, those that want to go full speed into the API world. They're looking to kind of adopt APIs as much as they possibly can. And then those who say, what are really the benefits? I get my intraday reports 3 times a day. I do, my investments or debt pay downs at 2 p.m. after the last one comes in. So I really need things to be real time, Yeah, and, execute payments through the historical payment rails. Yeah, they take 2 to 3 days to settle or whatever, but, that's what the market expects, right? That's what the suppliers are expecting anyway. And so, yeah, I mean, those are valid points, but I think it also depends on your business model, right? There's probably no, negating the fact that having better real-time visibility is better strategically for the business, right? So if you know instantly when a large balance moves into your account or out of your account, or when a large, foreign currency position moves into your account, you're just in a better position to hedge that or, use that excess cash to pay down debt, invest. There's just more you can do strategically. Real-time payments also, providing a lot of benefits to the market in terms of they settle immediately, and a lot of times they extend the window for how you can execute payments beyond the traditional wire cutoff time, right? Even there's talk about moving in the future to 24/7 payments, right, in a global world through these instant payment methods as well, right? And that's huge for organizations and the receivers of those payments, particularly, right? So it's a strategic advantage if you can pay somebody through an instant payment method as well, and on their side they have immediate access to the funds to meet their obligations. So you can use it from that perspective. But I think that a lot of what we're seeing is that it's very industry specific. Who benefits the most? So industries like the logistics industry, for example, right, where everything is so time sensitive. A payment to a shipper could set off this whole string of downstream activities that ultimately allows that shipment to reach your customer on time. And it all relies on settling quickly, confirmations being provided to those receivers of those funds, right? So real-time payments definitely have a lot of application there. And then I'm also seeing anybody in the service industry, really, if you're paying individuals through real-time payment methods as well, or anybody who's like part of their business model is tapping into the so-called gig economy, right? And they need to pay people quickly and have those funds settled instantly. They're seeing a lot of benefits to this as well. So yeah, I mean, there's that historical argument that maybe real time is not yet prime time yet, but I think there's also a lot of benefits out there that organizations are recognizing from a real sense today as well. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely believe that APIs allow for automation. And then once you start to get automation in place between all the connectivities, then you can bring in the real time as well because it's automated. So machines can then make the decisions automatically, do Forex hedging like you mentioned, do other kind of cash flow warnings, real time. There's just a lot more things you can do that benefit from real time once you have automation in place for the system.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and from that standpoint, I mean, maybe that's a good segue. We talked a lot about APIs, communication, to from banking partners, and then between applications. But just within the organization itself, there's a lot of really valuable data that's flowing around that everybody wants to have access to, right? It's not just one department that needs specific data. Treasury, they might be the collector of bank reporting, but accounting wants that data too. Or FP&A has the forecast data, which Treasury wants, or AP and procurement have the supplier information, which both compliance and Treasury want. So APIs are really opening up the door to be able to access that data more holistically within an organization itself, right? So that you break down what we think of as like historically siloed data by departments, and you access it in a more efficient way across the company.
No, definitely. Like if you think about all this data flow, it's also information flow. So if you can leverage from data lakes to actually collect this, then you can start to do processes to actually monitor what's going on, get bigger insights from this. And then you can actually do metadata from this and then metadata pooling. So you can do community fraud prevention. So multiple parties can link their metadata together. And it's just kind of endless where you can go just because the data itself then becomes value. Like they say, data is the new gold, but I actually say that the data is more like refined. You want refined data because then it's like refined oil. And if you look at Rockefeller, he made all his money from refining oil, not from actually producing barrels of oil. So it's all about producing good metadata by capturing as much data as you can from your processes, and then using this metadata for bigger insights and new products that can generate from this.
Mm-hmm. No, I agreed 100%. And I mean, to the point you just made, it does seem like APIs and data in particular are fueling a lot of the coming to market technologies that offer so much promise to finance and treasury practitioners. So you have your AI and predictive modeling type technologies, but if you think about it, they all rely on data. AI and pattern recognition is only as good as the data set that it has to look to find those patterns and to make those predictions. And so from that standpoint, APIs are helping build the data lake, right? So first of all, build that data set, and then be able to access it in a way that's really covers all the different variables an organization might look to cover as part of their strategy. So, for example, we take fraud prevention. You might need to access your historical payment data to view trends in that for fraud prevention, for detection of abnormalities. But you might also need to access your supplier master to see if there's been any changes to that look abnormal for these so-called, what we're seeing a lot these days are these fake invoice, fake wire instruction change requests that are attacking the supply chain individuals directly, right? So that's another valuable data source to tap into. And then maybe even third-party sources of data too. So, different lists of restricted parties or, known fraudulent accounts, known valid accounts can be used as part of that strategy too. And APIs kind of complete that cycle to really be able to access all those data points, and an organization can plug it all into one specific process. So definitely.
And what's the cycle as well? The APIs can actually collect this data, look for historical patterns, like you mentioned, for fraud, and also just look at basic things like, has this vendor suddenly changed address? If so, flag an alert whoever's responsible to show like this is maybe an issue. So there's still manual work that can be done to double check the systems are right, but the machines themselves are actually doing most of this kind of work through automation and AI. You can never take the domain knowledge away from people, but you can make people more efficient through automation and AI.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I'd agree 100%. So, all right, we probably said a few things here that got people pretty excited about APIs, but we haven't gotten into the portion here where we talk about the challenges. I know we talked about them a bit here. So despite all the efficiencies that they bring, there are still a lot of challenges that organizations face in broad API adoption. One we talked about is the lack of standardization amongst APIs, probably the biggest challenge, right? I think in API adoption. And, is this likely to change? I've read a little bit about, some discussion on the bank side about, a group working on a framework for banking APIs. It's based around ISO 20022 to get some standardization there. I don't know, how much that's actually come to market yet, but, anything that you see on the horizon here, or even that's available today that helps solve some of these historical challenges for APIs?
Sadly, I don't see APIs becoming more normalized in any way anytime soon. You just look at different governments have different agendas for how they regulate and what they allow and don't allow. In the US, you have different states all coming up with their own rules. Then you've got the banks themselves coming up with their ideas for what their API should do. Then you have neobanks trying to add new features on top of this that isn't going to be supported by everyone. So, and then all the different API types. And then if you're doing global banking, you're really kind of lost because most of the banks is not even API based. So it's very, very challenging. But there are actual ways around this. There's something called enterprise payment optimizations that can actually solve this connectivity problems for the APIs to make it easier for treasurers. So there's ways to resolve this, which is good, but can we rely on governments and banks themselves to resolve it? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there as well. So the at least there are solutions in software, I guess, right? So to be able to translate all these disparate API protocols, give the organization the benefits they're looking to gain from APIs, real-time communication with their banking partners without the complexity that really goes into that in terms of navigating all those different API calls. And something we've commonly seen too, through implementations is on the application side. A lot of organizations are utilizing some middlewares for integration with their applications. So if you're using, if you're looking to access information via API from one central source, a Treasury aggregator or a data pool, for example, you can use a middleware to be able to just, pull all that data in a uniform way, and then just contemplate the integrations to the back office systems there. So to that point, some good software solutions out there, but the homogeneous or the different API protocols are likely not to go away anytime soon, in your opinion, huh?
Yeah, definitely not. But at least we have most APIs now using REST, so that's one positive thing. But just for payments themselves, there's so many new formats being created even to this day. So we're nowhere near standardization of payments, let alone APIs.
Yep. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah. So I mean, the technology is certainly promising, and it's there's some practical uses in place today that we've seen organizations put in place that work great. And like we mentioned before, there's only more opportunity for the future in terms of how APIs can be leveraged to bring automation, better analytics, the use of AI, like I mentioned before, into treasury processes to really, facilitate more efficiency and for treasurers out there and better data analytics. So maybe a good point to end on here, and maybe we hopefully don't shoot ourselves in the foot here a bit, but I was thinking we could make some predictions for 2022. You know, what will be the biggest efficiency, I guess, that finance or treasury gains from APIs, or you know, just in general, what would be the biggest advancement that you'd expect in APIs for 2022? Maybe I can start. I'm going to make a bold one here, and I'm going to say that you know, APIs will allow for some sort of progression into EBAM for corporates, right? Electronic bank account management with your banking partners. Either at least being able to pull your bank account information from your banks, the signer information, the information they keep on file within their systems, or hopefully potentially also allowing you to facilitate a request to do things like update a signatory. So this is something the market has been calling for a very, very, very long time. And I know it's kind of a bold prediction here, but I hope that APIs can maybe push us into that direction the next year. So, but interesting to hear what you think would be something that might occur next year.
So 2022 is definitely short term, so I'll stick to the short term things. I definitely see more APIs available and providing better connectivity. That's definitely something that's going to happen. Definitely more real-time data as well and processes. Like, even though they say it's real-time, I think it'll become really real-time rather than maybe there's a bit of latency. Then there's also going to be better international like insights from just holistic data. And also, I think there's going to be a lot more complexity from all the many new APIs coming into play. So even though it's going to look like it's better picture because there's more APIs available, there's more real-timeness available, it's going to bring in more complexity to companies.
Mm-hmm.
We may see a little regulation around this as well. Like, I can see maybe California kind of reacting more and starting to regulate this. UK as well will probably bring in new regulations, and the EU will probably follow. So.
Mm-hmm. Great. So yeah, some good things to look out for there, and some things to maybe keep an eye on from that perspective as well, from a regulatory perspective. So I think those are valuable insights, and you know, I think that kind of brings us to the end of our discussion here, at least the part that that we were, you know, kind of managing as a discussion. But we're also happy to answer any questions from the group that might have come in during the course of this session today. And I see Jen has appeared back on the screen here. Jen, have we received any questions from the group?
Yes, we got a few questions. So you guys can choose who will take this first one. The first one comes in from Tamara, and she asks, I'm sorry, can you please repeat the differences between file-based like SFTP and APIs? Could you go back and revisit that quickly and talk about that?
Yes, definitely. So usually FSTPs are just a place, kind of like Dropbox, where you grab a file from your computer and then you transfer it to this place where files are stored. That's the old way of doing it. The new way of APIs is the APIs pull the data directly from servers or in the cloud or physically. So there's no need to generate a spreadsheet file or whatever file is being sent. It's just automatically pulled from a database and sent to another database. That's the difference, primarily that APIs enable. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you. And also, if we don't fully cover your question, you have any further questions, just reach out to us or we can reach out to you after the session. Next question comes in from Kate. What is more important, using APIs for real-time, instant, oh, hold on 1 second, or simple connectivity, or both?
It depends on the business needs and the treasurer's needs. Real-time is probably very critical for some, and just connectivity is probably better for others. So I would say it just depends on the individual's needs.
Okay,
You agree,
fantastic.
John?
And last one, I think maybe more of a statement, maybe you can address it. API to banks in Europe also require SCA, so you cannot do batch.
Yeah, so there's ways to enable that via plugins, but it's a complex discussion. So I can definitely talk more about this offline afterwards, just because the subject matter is fairly complex for how to achieve that, but it is achievable. It's just not out of the box. It's not naturally available by an API. That's correct.
And sorry, we just had a question come in from Kaja. Security and APIs, how can you be sure? Question mark.
This is actually where I see regulation coming in. We have it's really up to the banks to, but there's some regulation for how you should do security on your APIs. What type of encryption you should use, how the data should be encrypted in transit, what methods of encryption. Those are constantly changing and being updated as computing power gets faster, and people are working at ways to decrypt what used to be safe encryption-wise. And then also the technology behind how you authorize them through an API, whether it's token-based or you have to authenticate just by signing if it's session-based. So there's many different ways of how you can do this. But I think more regulation will definitely come in just to say, okay, this is the best way to do it. This is exactly how you should do it. Stop having all these different methods to do this. Because as we say, cybercrime is a big problem now. And you just have to search for all the APIs until you find one that's vulnerable.
Okay, great. And as you were speaking, 3 more questions rolled in. Here we go. What would be your top 3 best APIs for Treasury from Andres?
Oh, that would just be name dropping. Well, TIS, obviously. We have very good APIs on the platform. I would have to think about that actually for the rest. But there's, like, in terms of the technology or in terms of products, like technology-wise, it also depends on your needs, whether it's internal, external. REST and JSON are the preferred ways for engineers, just because the data is in a format that works with code very well.
Okay, great. We can follow up on that one.
Yeah, I'll also say, maybe just like, like Stephen mentioned, I think that we have a great API, but from a banking standpoint, I've historically found that the Nordic banks have great APIs as well that can support a lot of functionality, even batch transfer of payment files and things like that. So maybe I'll just name drop the region rather than specific banks we've worked with. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, maybe that's what I can add to that one.
Yeah, and the Nordic banks are actually, I agree, they are pretty good for their APIs, and they are real time as well. And they're fully integrated with the bank ID in Sweden, so that all the banks use the same authentication system, which goes back to security. So they have very good security, very good real time, and instant payments from phone to phone. So they do seem to be leading the way, and Estonia as well. They're very good as well.
Okay, great. Sophie asks, may we please have some more examples of how APIs can assist treasurers in daily operations?
Daily. So it kind of depends what your daily operations typically are, but you could definitely see through virtual accounts and APIs the real-time balances for the total picture for cash flow forecasting based on historical real-time data as well. So that can be adjusted real-time. Reporting, you can see real-time reports, not just static reports, and you can also generate reports at different levels from the same data. So whether you're CFO, a treasurer, a department lead, you can just have different reports generated from the same data from the APIs all real time.
Yeah, the others would maybe be real-time reconciliation is one advantage, I think, if that's important to your organization to be able to reconcile and confirm payment execution in real time. APIs are allowing for that, which is a big benefit to organizations. And from a cash positioning and forecasting standpoint, if you're continuously synchronizing bank information as well as forecast information, either through FP&A reports or through your payables and receivables information, you have a cash position that's constantly updating, right? Or a forecast, or projected forecast that's constantly updating based on that cash position as well. So those are some of the benefits that we're seeing, I think, from real-time APIs.
Okay, great. So everyone, thank you so much for all your wonderful questions. If we didn't answer something or we need to follow up with you, we can do so after the session. We'll also be sending everybody an email with the recording in a couple of days. So you'll also have an opportunity to just hit respond and you can reach out to John and Steve and get your answers. So that kind of concludes the Q&A session. Just want to remind everybody in the control panel, there's also 2 downloadables that you can get more information. One is Understanding APIs and the other one is about the enterprise payments optimization platform. So you can read up about that a little bit more. And now I'll hand it back to John.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, and that really concludes our session for today. So thanks everybody a lot for joining today. I hope you found this informative. You're walking away better, with a better understanding of APIs, how they're being used today, where the technology is now, where the technology is heading, and some of the potential roadblocks or problems that might exist with an API-based strategy. I definitely enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot, so I have to thank Stephen for joining today. I thought that was great. So thanks for all the insights that you gave us during the course of that conversation.
Thanks,
Yes, thanks so much.
It's been really good as well. I've enjoyed it as well, and just talking about APIs because I'm really passionate about data, and APIs really enable data, and who knows what we can do in the long term. Like you asked me about the short-term future, the long-term future is where it gets really exciting because we have more AI, more data, more crowdsourced connectivity, so we can link multiple systems, multiple banks together, and that's when you get really good insights and just better fraud protection, better tools.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks again. And if there's any questions that came up that we didn't answer, like Jen mentioned, or if you just want to continue the conversation a little bit further post call today, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to connect. So otherwise, thanks a lot. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day.